Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I've got a story time for you. In the fall of 1977, a friend and I were huge fans of the movie Phantom of the Paradise, and it happened to be playing at our local drive-in theater. Well, being too young to drive and no one willing to take us, we thought, what if we walked to the theater, hopped the back fence, stayed in the back, we could see the movie for free, right? So, we walked to the theater, and they were showing 5 horror movies that night from dusk till dawn, before there was a movie by that actual name. So we hopped the fence, and while we were running in, we were so excited and shocked that we actually made it that we weren't paying attention, and the first car we ran into was my brother's car. He was there with some friends, and they let us in, and we did get to see Phantom of the Paradise. Now, a real quick story about the background of this drive-in movie theater. It was called the 99E, E for East Highway 99 near Stockton, California. Now, the odd thing was this movie theater was right next to a racetrack. So on the weekends, when everybody's usually going to the movies, the races were going on. Now, how anyone could hear the movie while the races were happening is beyond me. But you know what? Nobody complained. And if you were at the races, you could see the movie screen from the stands. And sometimes that movie theater showed movies that showed, well, more than maybe some moms would like. But you know what? Nobody complained. No moms went over there and tried to shut down the theater, and no angry people watching movies were trying to go over to the racetrack and shut it down. It just was a very different time in the 1970s. So these are the movies that we saw that night, 5 horror films from dusk till dawn, in this order.
Phantom of the Paradise, 1974. One of my most favorite movies of all time, in spite of it being a box office flop and a bit campy. But if you know it and love it, you just don't care about its shortcomings. We do plan to do a full video on this movie in the future, but for now, just a quick overview. It's basically Phantom of the Opera meets Faust and The Portrait of Dorian Gray. Winslow Leach, played by William Finley, a composer writing his magnum opus, coincidentally called Faust, captures the attention of the legendary music genius Swan, played by Paul Williams, who essentially swindles the music away from Winslow to use at his future rock palace, the Paradise. Not long after, we're introduced to the Christine Daae of the film in Phoenix, played by Jessica Harper. Instantly, Winslow falls for her, but is soon tossed into prison and eventually breaks out and has a horrifying accident by getting his face crushed in a record press. This destroys his face and voice. So now he becomes the Phantom and plots to destroy Swan at any cost. The movie continues to introduce great songs, all written by Paul Williams, and quirky characters like Philbin, played by George Momoli. Beef, the glam rock superstar played by Garrett Graham, and of course the rock group, the Juicy Fruits, who become the Beach Bums, and eventually the Undeads. I won't give away the ending in case you haven't seen it, but at 90 minutes long, this film packs a lot in. While the film initially flopped, it gathered a cult following, but was popular in Winnipeg and in France. An amazing Blu-ray was released several years ago, and I've got a copy of it, and it's got some great bonus features, so check it out.
Far out.
Next up is Suspiria, 1977. Oddly enough, Jessica Harper returns for this Dario Argento classic. The story centers around Susie Bannion, played by Harper, a young American ballet student who travels to Germany to attend a prestigious dance academy. Upon her arrival, Susie encounters a panicked student fleeing the academy during a torrential storm. The next day, Susie learns that the student, along with a friend, has been brutally murdered in a grotesque fashion, setting the grim tone for her time at the academy. Soon, she finds herself beginning to experience strange symptoms and eerie events. The atmosphere in the academy is oppressive, particularly by the enigmatic and severe headmistress, Madame Blanc, and the strict dance instructor, Miss Tanner. Susie befriends another student named Sarah, who reveals her suspicions that something sinister is happening at the academy. Together, they investigate, gradually uncovering the horrifying truth. The academy is a front for a coven of witches, led by the ancient and malevolent Helena Marcos, also known as the Mother of Sighs, As the witch's malevolent plans come to light, Susie must confront the terrifying reality to survive the Academy's deadly secrets. Squirm, 1976. Now, this movie is not for the squeamish. Squirm is all about, well, worms. Squirm also ticks all the boxes as a cult horror film. It takes place in a small town in Georgia that becomes the epicenter of a terrifying invasion of carnivorous worms. The film begins with a severe storm that knocks down power lines, causing electricity to surge into the wet ground. This unusual event awakens thousands of bloodthirsty worms, which begin to surface in search of, you guessed it, human flesh. The main story follows Mick, who's a young guy from New York. He arrives in the rural town of Fly Creek to visit his girlfriend, Jerry. Upon his arrival, Mick starts to notice strange occurrences and a growing unease among the townspeople. As the worms become increasingly aggressive, they begin to invade homes, attack livestock, and even kill several townspeople in the most gruesome of ways. Mick, Jerry, and her family soon find themselves trapped in the nightmare as they try to survive the onslaught of wriggling, flesh-eating worms. Yeah, this movie really creeped me out. It made me not to want to go fishing and use worms in the future. Tales from the Crypt, 1972. Tales from the Crypt is a British horror anthology film based on the EC comic series of the same name. That would also later inspire the HBO series by the same name. It begins with a group of 5 strangers who are on a tour of an ancient catacomb. Soon they find themselves separated from their tour group, and they become trapped in a chamber where they meet the eerie crypt keeper, played by Sir Ralph Richardson. Here they eventually each share their own personal story. Now, if you haven't seen this film, there are spoilers ahead. The first story is called And All Through the House. Joan, appropriately played by Joan Collins, is a woman who murders her husband on Christmas Eve to collect his insurance money. But soon she's terrorized by an escaped homicidal maniac dressed as Santa Claus. As she tries to cover up the crime, the deranged Santa closes in, and Joan's actions ultimately lead to her own grisly end. Story number 2 is called Reflection of Death. Carl, he abandons his wife and children to run away with his mistress. However, during their escape, they get into a car accident. When Carl awakens, he finds that nobody seems to recognize him, and people react to him with horror. He soon discovered that he's died in the crash and is now a decaying corpse, doomed to relive his horror of his death. Number 3. Poetic Justice. James is a wealthy and cruel man and is obsessed with driving his elderly neighbor, Mr. Grimsdyke, played by Peter Cushing, out of the neighborhood. He torments Grimsdyke with false accusations and cruel tricks, leading the old man to take his own life. A year later, Grimsdyke rises from the grave to exact poetic justice, delivering a Valentine's Day message to James in the form of his own still beating heart. Number 4. Wish You Were Here. Ralph, a businessman, is on the brink of financial ruin, and he discovers a statue that grants 3 wishes. This is based on the story of the monkey's paw. His wife uses the first wish to restore their lost wealth, but this leads to Ralph's death in a car accident. Desperate to bring him back, her second wish resurrects Ralph, but in a twisted, painful state. Her final wish seals their fate in a gruesome manner as Ralph is doomed to eternal torment. And the last story, Blind Alleys. Major Rogers is a callous director of a home for the blind. He mistreats the residents, leading to the death of one of them. The blind residents band together to take revenge on Rogers, creating a deadly maze of razor blades and a starved dog, forcing him to experience the pain and fear that he inflicted on the others. At the conclusion of hearing Major Rogers' story, we return to the crypt, where the 5 strangers realize that the crypt keeper has shown them the consequences of their own actions, and that they are already dead and in hell, condemned to relive their sins for eternity. The film ends with the Crypt Keeper revealing that their stories serve as a warning to others about the dangers of greed, cruelty, and selfishness. And finally, our last film of the night, Alfred Hitchcock's Family Plot, 1976. So to be honest, by this time, it's around 3 a.m., and this movie is about 2 hours long, which would have ended about 5 a.m., and I had fallen asleep. So I actually didn't see Family Plot until many years later on VHS home video. While it is Alfred Hitchcock's final film, it's not one of my favorites. But if you haven't seen it, here's a quick overview. The film combines two storylines, the first being of Blanche Tyler, a quirky and deceptive fake psychic, and her boyfriend, George Lumley, a down-on-his-luck cab driver, played by Bruce Dern. Blanche is hired by a wealthy elderly woman, Julia Rainbird, to locate her long-lost nephew, the illegitimate son of her deceased sister, who was given up for adoption. Julia promises a substantial reward for finding the heir to the Rainbird fortune, and Blanche, eager to collect the money, begins her investigation with George's help. They track down clues that lead them to Arthur Adamson, a seemingly respectable jeweler who, unbeknownst to them, has a dark secret. The second plot involves Arthur Adamson, the missing heir, played by William Devane, who has reinvented himself as a criminal mastermind. Along with his girlfriend, played by Karen Black, Arthur kidnaps wealthy individuals and holds them ransom, collecting valuable diamonds as payment. The couple carefully orchestrates these abductions, keeping their criminal activities hidden behind the facade of their jewelry business. As Blanche and George's investigation brings them closer to Arthur, their bumbling detective work unintentionally puts them in the path of his dangerous schemes. In typical Hitchcock fashion, Family Plot combines all those suspenseful moments you come to expect and love in a classic Alfred Hitchcock movie. So that's my overnight stay at the 99E Drive-In, where I snuck in to see one movie and got to almost watch 5. What's one of your favorite drive-in movie moments? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.